Hey there, friend, tonight, let's open a different kind of doorway, not one made of stone or iron, but of time. If you're settling in with a soft blanket or listening as you drift off beneath the quiet hum of the night, I invite you to slow everything down. Let the tension melt from your shoulders. You don't need to be anywhere else but here. Before we fully settle in, if this kind of calm historical wandering soothes your mind, feel free to gently tap that like button and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. And let me know in the comments what time it is where you are. I always find it oddly comforting to know which corners of the world are dreaming alongside mine. Now, if you can, dim the lights or just let the darkness cradle you. Maybe there's a quiet fan spinning softly nearby, or the sound of distant rain tapping at the window. Let it be part of the world we're about to enter. Because tonight, we aren't following kings or knights or wars or politics. No, we're stepping through a lesser-known side door of history into the stone corridors, creaking kitchens, and quiet courtyards of a medieval castle. But we won't be meeting royalty. We'll be brushing past them, eyes low. We'll be with the servants, the stable boys, the women who stirred heavy pots over smoky fires, the laborers who patched crumbling walls and hauled water long before the sun rose. We'll learn what it was like to live at the edge of nobility within arm's reach of power, yet bound by a life of endless motion, silence, and obedience. We'll walk through daily rituals and forgotten traditions, explore where they slept, what they ate, how they believed, and how they endured. And perhaps, somewhere along the way, the quiet rhythm of their world will lull your mind gently toward rest. Now, close your eyes if you like, and let's begin. Tonight's journey theme is everyday lives of servants and laborers in a medieval castle. Imagine, if you will, a morning so quiet that even the crows in the distance seem hesitant to disturb it. The air is cool, the sort of cool that wraps softly around your skin, neither biting nor warm, just present. Above, the sky has not yet chosen a color. It remains a pale whisper of blue-gray, like diluted ink over parchment. A light mist curls around the ground, settling low in the hollows of stone and wood. Everything is still. You are standing at the edge of a castle, not the glamorous kind etched in fairy tales or movie sets, but a living, breathing structure of layered stone, timber beams, and echoing courtyards. It's not quiet, because nothing is happening, rather. It is quiet in the way a forest is at dawn, where life stirs carefully, rhythmically, respectfully. You walk toward the main gate, not the grand entrance used for processions or visiting nobles, but the side path used by those whose names are not remembered in history books. The stone beneath your feet is uneven, worn from years of traffic by boots that never belonged to lords or ladies. There are muddy prints from the night before, dried into shallow impressions. Bits of straw cling to the walls. You are not the first to walk this path, and you will not be the last. Somewhere ahead, there is the faint rattle of iron against iron. A stable hand is already moving. You can hear him murmur gently to the horses as he brushes them down, the stroke steady, comforting, as much for himself as for the animal. The heavy smell of damp hay, mixed with animal musk and the faint acidic bite of manure, rises gently on the mist. It is not unpleasant, just real, just part of the air here. Beyond the stable, the kitchen is beginning to stir. Not the noble kitchen, where feasts are prepared and platters gleam. No, this is the scullery, where the fire never truly dies and the work never truly ends. There is a low crackle as a fire is coaxed back to life. A woman blowing gently through a bundle of twigs. She holds her breath each time the flame flares. Her apron is stained with ash and flour. Her hands, though chapped and red, move with purpose. This is where our journey begins, not with battles, or coronations, or royal scandals, but with the slow, persistent rhythm of people rising to do what must be done. A boy arrives, no older than 11. He carries two wooden buckets slushing with water drawn from the well outside. He doesn't spill a drop. His walk is measured. He has done this many times. His tunic is too large, hanging from one shoulder. He wears no shoes. His toes are cracked and dark with the memory of old frost. Still, he hums to himself an old tune, perhaps a lullaby or work song passed down by his mother. The castle itself is a contradiction. It is both shelter and burden, protection and prison. It is a place built for war, but lived enduring peace. It is grand in its towers, yet grim in its corners. For those who serve within it, the castle is less a monument and more a maze, a place of endless motion and unyielding rules. As you pass under an arched doorway into the servants' corridor, the sounds change. You begin to hear the scratch of broom bristles on stone, the clatter of copper pots being lifted from hooks, the quiet, almost imperceptible sighs of those who have been awake far longer than the sun. No one speaks loudly. Speech here is careful, intentional. Noise draws attention, and attention is not always welcome. You pass a row of sleeping pallets. Thin wool blankets lie crumpled, still clinging to the warmth of bodies that have since risen. A single candle flickers at the end of the hall, its flame dancing slightly as you walk past. It smells of tallow and animal fat wax that leaves a greasy shadow on the air. The walls here are rough and cold. They weep moisture during the night. And in the winter, they seem to breathe it out again in long, bone-deep shivers. Here lives a woman named Alice. You won't read her name in any royal ledger. She's worked here for 14 years, ever since her village was swallowed by debt and poor harvest. Her hands are as skilled at milking a goat as they are at scrubbing blood from a nobleman's tunic. She knows which corners of the wall allow her to lean for just a moment without being seen. She knows which guard will turn his head if she lingers too long by the bread cart. And yet, she does not complain. Complaining is a privilege. She simply moves methodically, carefully, endlessly. Her day begins in darkness and ends in near darkness. She sleeps when she can, dreams when she dares, laughs only when she is sure no one will hear. In the servants' quarters, personal belongings are few: a piece of ribbon, a carved spoon, a small square of cloth embroidered with initials in thread, now faded to rust. These things matter deeply. They are not luxuries, they are identities. In a life of service, where one's name is often forgotten or replaced with girl or boy or you there, these small objects whisper reminders. Asterisk, you are more than your work. Asterisk. Let us turn now toward the main courtyard, where larger preparations are underway. A team of laborers is hoisting sacks of grain into a storehouse. Each sack weighs as much as a full-grown man. They lift in silence, not out of misery, but efficiency. One man has wrapped cloth around his hands to protect against the coarse rope. Another mutters numbers under his breath, keeping count for the tally that will be recorded probably inaccurately by the steward later. To your left, the laundry yard. Long lines of woolen clothing, rough spun linens, and stiff undergarments flap softly in the breeze. A girl, no more than 13, beats cloth against a stone basin, her arms soaked to the elbow. The water is cold, her breath comes in visible clouds. Yet she continues, eyes unfocused, lost in the rhythm. Beat, soak, ring, beat again. Further down a side passage, a door stands ajar. You step inside and are greeted by the scent of yeast and rising dough. A large wooden bowl rests near the fire, covered by a damp cloth. This is the baker's corner, and though he is not noble, his position is higher than most. Bread is essential. It is not a delicacy, it is the foundation. Without it, the entire household becomes unsteady. The baker, a wide-shouldered man with flour in his beard, moves slowly. Not from laziness, but from confidence. He has shaped the same dough for over 20 years. He knows the way heat behaves in different seasons. He knows which part of the oven cooks too quickly. He does not need to measure the flour. His fingers know the weight of enough. He nods toward you once, but says nothing. His focus remains on the loaves, rising ever so slightly, like the chests of sleepers. Outside, the sounds begin to shift. The castle is waking in layers. The servants and laborers are already 2 hours into their tasks. Now the stewards begin to move, The squires begin to check armor, and the first clatter of horse hooves announces the arrival of someone more important. But we remain behind, in the back corridors, with the woman who sweeps the ashes, with the boy who scrapes the refuse into buckets, with the man who oils the hinges and never speaks a word. This is the world of the unseen, and yet it is the world that holds the castle together. Every stone set, every floor swept, every bowl filled, all made possible by hands you will never read about in textbooks. And yet, they shaped the very environment that allowed knights to shine and kings to rule. There are moments of softness here, too, a snatch of laughter when backs are turned, a whispered song passed down from mother to daughter, a boiled egg split between friends in the cellar, a secret glance between the candle boy and the girl who brings the firewood. These are not lives of luxury, but they are lives of meaning, and they are worth remembering. Let this image settle in your mind: a castle before dawn, softly breathing, lit by scattered firelight. A world in motion, not in glory, not in grandeur, but in quiet, necessary grace. And now that we've stepped into their world, let us turn gently outward and look at what shaped it: the hills, the rivers, the wines, and the seasons that governed not only the castle's operations, but every footstep taken by those within its walls. Step with me now, away from the stone walls and steaming kitchens, beyond the inner gates and worn stairways. Let us walk out, through the morning mist, into the landscape that quietly shaped every day in the life of a medieval servant or labourer. Because before there was bread to bake, hay to lift, or linen to scrub, there was the land. The castle, in all its stubborn grey majesty, did not rise in isolation. It was born of its surroundings, rooted into hills, nestled beside rivers, carved into rocky cliffs, or perched upon man-made mounds. Its very location dictated the rhythms of labour, the timing of harvests, the placement of wells, and even the order of chores. Take a moment and imagine the terrain surrounding a typical castle in northern Europe. The year is perhaps 1387 or 1222. It hardly matters. The air smells of moss, of loamy earth. Gentle hills roll in the distance, dotted with sheep and thin trails of smoke from distant cottages. A brook trickles slowly through the valley, the kind that overflows in spring and nearly vanishes by late summer. This is not a wild land, not anymore. It has been nudged, coaxed, carved into submission by generations of labour. Trees were cleared to make way for small barley fields. Low stone walls mark the limits of a lord's estate. The forest begins only where the reach of man reluctantly ends. To a servant within the castle, the landscape was both backdrop and master. You see, everything began with the seasons. The castle's daily operations, from menus to maintenance schedules, bent to the slow turning of the year. In winter, life drew inward. The outer walls were quiet, pathways slick with ice or trodden mud. The stables were packed with hay, warmth, and bodies pressed close. Servants wore layers of rough wool, many passed down from others before them. Hands grew stiff, and water had to be cracked open in buckets each morning. Fires burned longer, and wood was precious. Laundry froze before it dried. Cold crept into everything, into bones, into breath, into dreams. But in summer, the castle breathed outward. Doors remained open longer, chores multiplied. Harvests approached, and with them came carts full of grain, apples, salted fish. Dust clung to every hem, insects hummed beneath windows. Days were longer, but so was the workload. The castle walls grew warm in the sun, and shadows shrank. Servants sweated through their shifts, fetching water in heavier buckets, their backs sunburned and sore. And yet, there was beauty too. Warm wind through the lavender hedges near the herb garden. Birds nesting in the arrow slits, frogs chirping near the castle moat, which in reality was less a shining lake and more a brackish, stubborn ditch, often stagnant, sometimes foul-smelling, and yet entirely necessary. Then there was autumn, both a reward and a warning. The final chance to prepare before the frost. Baskets of apples gathered, mushrooms dried over fires, cider slowly pressed by hand. The wind began to change, shadows lengthened again. The stone walls grew cool to the touch, winter whispered in from the edges. The castle's environment shaped not just what servants did, but how they moved. Paths were carved not out of preference, but practicality. The shortest route between 2 points was not always the safest. In spring, mud turned roads into traps. In fall, slippery moors crept along shaded stairs. A servant's awareness of terrain became instinctual. And then there was the role of water. Castles needed water, lots of it, for drinking, for cooking, for washing, for extinguishing fires, for brewing ale, and even for cooling certain storerooms. Most castles were built near a natural source, be it a river, a spring, or a well-fed pond. But fetching that water was rarely a noble task. Instead, it fell to a rotation of servants, many young, often barefoot, carrying sloshing buckets up steep paths, over cobbles, and through corridors. The environment also shaped the food, what could grow, what could be stored, what had to be traded. A servant's diet, often simple and repetitive, was born directly from the land. In fertile regions, peas, beans, and leeks thrived. In rocky or coastal areas, fish and seaweed might supplement the otherwise bland fare. Certain castles lay near forests, which brought both bounty and danger. Servants tasked with gathering wood or mushrooms entered cautiously. Wild animals, boars, wolves, or worse, might lurk. But the forest also whispered with freedom. Sometimes, servants stole moments of rest there, or met in secret, or dreamed of something beyond the walls. To live in service was to live in tune with the natural world, whether one wished to or not. Now, imagine the labourers outside the castle walls, those tasked with building, repairing, and managing the infrastructure that tied the castle to the broader world. Roads were not paved, bridges often washed out. A heavy rain could transform a gentle slope into a landslide. These men worked with stone, with mud, with timber. Their hands bore the weather, their lungs bore the dust. Their bodies carried the seasons with them. The castle walls did not protect them, they employed them. To the servants within, even the air was different depending on where one worked. The lower halls smelled of damp, the upper levels smelled of beeswax, aged wool, and sometimes lavender. The kitchen gardens brought breezes laced with sage, rosemary, and onion. The laundry yards smelled of lye and wet cloth. The latrine towers, well, their scent lingered further than anyone liked to admit. Geography also played a silent role in hierarchy. Those born in distant villages, who came from low valleys or windswept coasts, often held less status among the staff than those from nearby towns. The local dialect marked them. Their knowledge of the land or lack thereof determined which jobs they were offered. Some tasks required the confidence to climb narrow cliff paths or work with freezing river water. Others, like tending gardens or managing bees, demanded an understanding of soil and sunlight. The land could be a harsh teacher, but also a subtle comfort. Some servants found solace in the garden rows, in the hum of bees, in the predictable tides of planting and pruning. Others learned to read the weather like a book, cloud patterns, wind shifts, bird silence. These were not mystical talents, but hard-earned instincts. To survive here was to listen to the ground, to the air, to the trees, and so the geography around a castle was not merely a backdrop. It was a character, quiet, powerful, sometimes merciful, sometimes cruel. It shaped their days and their sleep, their aches and their joys, their work and their very breath. The castle, with all its towering might, still bowed to the land. Now, as the sun begins to rise in our imagined sky, casting gold across the highest turrets and coaxing light into the servant halls, let us follow that light into their most personal spaces, the places where servants rested, dreamed, whispered, and prepared to face another day. Let us now step inside, not through the archways that lead to the great hall, nor up the spiral staircases that end in feathered beds and perfumed baths. No, follow instead the narrow corridor behind the kitchens, the one so tight that people cannot pass without turning sideways. It bends left, then dips down to uneven steps, into a chamber that is neither entirely above ground nor quite below it. The air is cool here, and it always smells faintly of stone, wool, and something you cannot name. This is where the servants sleep, private space, in the life of a medieval labourer or castle servant, did not mean solitude or luxury. It meant shelter. It meant a place where, for a few hours, your body could go still. It meant sometimes a wall between you and the wind. Imagine the room. The walls are rough, built from uneven stones, patched over generations, with whatever could be found: bits of wood, scraps of fabric, even discarded shingles. There is one window, narrow and high, with no glass. Just an open slit with a piece of oiled parchment stretched over it to block the wind. It lets in a watery light during the day, and at night, only the cold. There are no beds in the way you might know them. No frames, no headboards, no thick mattresses. Instead, there are pallets, bundles of straw or rushes bound tightly and laid on the ground, sometimes with a coarse cloth stretched over them, other times simply left bare. They are itchy. They do not insulate, but they are better than the stone. Blankets are scarce. Most are made from rough woven wool, patched and shared between shifts. A senior servant might have her own. Most others make do with layers of whatever can be found: old tunics, cloaks, sacking cloth. Warmth, like rest, is rationed by status. Servants sleep together, not just for lack of space, but for survival. In the depths of winter, bodies pressed side by side are the only real heat. It is not a question of modesty or preference, it is necessity. If you were to walk through one of these chambers at night, you might find a tangle of limbs beneath a heap of blankets. The rise and fall of breathing, the occasional rustle as someone turns, a soft cough, a muttered dream. Personal belongings are kept close, not in drawers or trunks. There are none but tucked beneath straw pallets or hidden behind loose stones in the wall. A wooden comb, a ribbon, faded but cherished. A flint stone for starting fire. A carved token from a child, now far away. These objects are more than sentimental. They are anchors. In a world that demanded everything of you, they offered a sliver of self. For those higher in the hierarchy, maids of the chamber, head cooks, stewards, a more private space might be granted. A small cubby, perhaps, separated by a hanging cloth or a wooden partition. Within, a cot raised slightly off the ground, a stall, a shelf with a candle stub. To most nobles, it would seem painfully austere. But to a servant, this was comfort, status, safety. Now, imagine the end of a long day, muscles sore, hands raw from scrubbing or lifting or kneeling 4 hours. The sun has long since vanished behind the battlements. The fires are banked. The corridors echo with the final footsteps of the watch. One by one, servants slip away from duty and into these cramped spaces. They remove their aprons, unlace their boots, fold their sleeves with care. Not out of vanity, but because clothing must last. A rip today is a freezing draft tomorrow. Sleep does not come easily. It arrives gradually, as warmth spreads from body to body, and the room settles into silence. Outside, the wind brushes against the stone, a shutter creaks. Far off, an owl calls once, then falls quiet. Inside, there is only breath, steady, repeating, the rhythm of exhaustion. But before sleep takes them fully, some whisper. They speak of home, of lovers, of small village fairs. They pass bits of gossip. Who scolded whom? Who stole an egg? Who might be leaving? Laughter is muffled into sleeves. Tears are hidden in shadows. These conversations are brief, not because there is nothing to say, but because there is no time to stay awake. Servants on the night shift sleep by day. They nestle into corners where the sun can't reach, wrapping scarves over their eyes. Others work split shifts and snatch moments of rest whenever they can. Sleep is not a single event, it is stolen in fragments. Now picture the servant assigned to the upper levels, perhaps one who tends to the ladies' wardrobe or delivers meals to the chapel. She sleeps in a room above the kitchens, warm from the heat rising below. The roof leaks in one corner, and a family of mice lives behind the shelf, but she does not mind. It is hers. She has hung a scrap of linen as a curtain and tucked lavender beneath her pillow. She is lucky. Contrast this with the labourers, those who build and maintain the castle structure. Many of them do not sleep inside at all. They lodge in outbuildings, sheds, or even makeshift tents during active construction seasons. Their sleeping spaces are closer to the earth. A patch of grass, a worn woolen roll, the stars for a ceiling, and what of privacy, the concept, as we understand it, did not exist. Servants were observed, not only by masters, but by each other. There was no hiding. Bodies changed, aged, weakened all in public. Modesty was a privilege. A servant bathed behind a thin screen if one was available. More often, they simply used a bucket in the corner, wiping down with a cloth, murmuring apologies if someone entered. And yet, within these boundaries, a form of intimacy grew. Friendships forged over shared burdens, sisters not by blood, but by broom and basin. Older servants mentoring the young, teaching them how to fold linens just so, or how to slip an extra crust of bread without being noticed. There were smiles and secrets and stories told by firelight. The closeness bred both friction and loyalty. Disputes were sharp, affection sharper still. The private spaces of servants were never entirely their own. And yet they mattered deeply. They held moments of breath, of laughter, of whispered dreams. They were the only places where the weight of the castle, the rules, the eyes, the demands could be loosened, even slightly. So as you imagine the walls of a castle, do not think only of stone and wood. Think of the straw pallet behind the stairs, the basin tucked beneath a window, the shoe drying beside a fire. These are foundations, too, built not of mortar, but of memory. As the candle in the corner gutters low and the room fades into gentle darkness, you feel a shift. The soft silence of rest has returned. The servant beside you breathes deeply, her hand tucked beneath her chin. The blanket rises and falls, like the tide. Now, let us leave them to their sleep, and turn, gently, toward what wakes them, hunger. The next chapter in our journey is one that defines every day, every shift, and every struggle. The scent reaches you before the sight does. It is faint at first, a gentle curl of wood smoke and boiled grain, riding the early morning chill, a messenger of warmth. You follow it instinctively, stepping softly across the uneven flagstones, guided not by voice or command, but by the deep, ancient signal of hunger. Not the sharp pang of sudden appetite, but the quiet, daily thrum, the kind that settles into your bones when nourishment is earned rather than expected. In a medieval castle, food is not just a comfort. It is a clock, a compass, a covenant. For the servants and labourers who wake long before the sun and rest only when darkness takes its final breath, meals are more than sustenance. They are markers of rhythm, of completion, of reward. They represent time measured not by bells, but by bowls. We begin, as always, in the kitchen, not the high kitchens, not the sprawling quarters, where venison is spiced with foreign powders and trenchers are trimmed in herbs. No, we begin in the lower kitchen, the heart of nourishment for those who serve. Here, the hearth is wide and blackened with soot, its stones glistening with decades of steam and smoke. Iron pots hang from thick chains, wooden spoons worn smooth by use rest beside kneading troughs darkened with age. The morning meal must be prepared quickly, quietly, and with as little waste as possible. The cook overseeing this part of the castle is neither jolly nor cruel. She is constant. Her name might be Daynell or Elfrida, or something forgotten in the margins of time. But her hands are firm and capable, and her voice carries just enough weight to part the haze of fatigue and the young ones who arrive to help her. She begins with grain. Always grain, ground barley, oats, or rye depending on the season and the stores. The flour is coarse, full of husk, sometimes flecked with tiny stones if the miller's grindstone is dull. Yet, it is dependable. Grain can be dried, stored, transported, and stretched to fill 100 bellies. She mixes it with water, nothing more, and stirs over low flame. The result is pottage. A word so humble, it barely draws breath, and yet so vital, it stands at the center of survival. Pottage changes with the seasons. In spring, it might carry young greens, nettles, garlic shoots, dandelion leaves plucked from the edges of the woods by servants who know which to take and which to avoid. In summer, the pot grows heavier with beans, onions, and even eggs if the hens are generous. In autumn, root vegetables begin to appear: carrots, leeks, turnips, parsnips, each chopped finely and stirred into the thickening mass. But in winter, when the frost tightens its grip, the pot becomes sparse once more. Perhaps a scrap of salted pork, a knuckle bone boiled for flavor, a whisper of cabbage, wilted but clinging to life. There is always bread, though what kind depends entirely on rank and availability. Servants eat rye or maslin bread, maslin being a rough mixture of wheat and rye or barley, baked in thick loaves that sit heavy in the hand and heavier still in the gut. The crust is dark, hard, sometimes cracked. Inside, it is dense, chewy, and faintly sour from the wild yeasts that rise without invitation. The loaves are not sliced, but torn, passed from hand to hand, dipped in pottage, held over the fire to soften, or chewed slowly during brief rests. If you were to lift the lid from the great pot in the kitchen hearth, the steam would rise slowly, perfumed with onions, smoke, and fatigue. The cook stirs with both arms, turning the thick contents from the bottom so they do not burn. A boy arrives with a basket of wilted herbs, parsley, marjoram, a pinch of sage, and hands them over without speaking. She nods, adds them, and continues. The smell deepens. Someone sighs. Now, let us follow the food. Meals for servants are not served at long tables. There is no ceremony, no procession. Instead, wooden bowls are filled and distributed, sometimes by rank, sometimes by order of duty. A laundress might eat in the warm corner behind the barrels. A stable hand might crouch in the courtyard, back against the sun-warmed wall. A seamstress rests her legs on a stool and balances her bowl on her knees. It is not about luxury, it is about access. About finding a quiet place for 10 minutes, maybe 15, no more. The ale is poured from casks in the cellar, small ale, weak and cloudy. Children drink it, elders drink it. It is safer than water drawn from the moat or the well, which may carry illness. It soothes thirst. It dulls the edge of sore muscles. It is nourishment in liquid form. Sometimes, food comes from the noble's table, not directly, but as scraps. Offal, bones, dried ends of fish, leftover pie crusts. These are collected, sorted, and distributed to the lower kitchen. The servants know how to make the most of these leavings. A bone still holds marrow. A rind of cheese becomes broth. Even drippings from a roast are poured into bread to soften and flavor. But not all are so fortunate. There are days, especially in late winter, when the stores run dangerously low. Rats may have breached the granaries. A shipment of salt fish may have spoiled. The last of the onions may have sprouted green from within. On such days, the pottage thins, and bread is rationed more strictly. Meals become moments of quiet negotiation. Can a cook spare a second ladle for the messenger boy who ran all night? Will the seamstress trade a patch of wool for a crust of yesterday's loaf? There are gardens, too, though small and often overlooked. They are tended with care. Walled kitchen gardens grow hardy herbs, legumes, and roots. The soil is poor, rocky, but turned often. Compost from the kitchens is buried beneath. Bees buzz among the flowering thyme, unaware of the hierarchy that looms above them. These gardens are where healing and flavor meet. Lavender to calm a cough. sage for cleansing, garlic for strength, rosemary for memory. A servant might slip a sprig into her apron before returning to work, not as theft, but as comfort. Beyond the castle, those lucky enough to have ties to nearby villages might trade for eggs, milk, or fresh greens. These exchanges are quiet, unofficial. A servant offers sewing or mending in return. A labourer promises to help repair a thatched roof after hours. Barter and kindness move more freely than coin. And yet, hunger always lingers. It is not the acute, desperate hunger of famine. It is quieter than that, a constant emptiness that never fully fades. It makes the smallest indulgence feel sacred. A sliver of honey, a boiled egg, a piece of fruit. An apple given by a kind cook is remembered for weeks. A plum stolen from the Lord's orchard becomes a whispered legend. There are rituals, too, around food. Prayers are said not loudly, but quietly, as a bowl is raised or a crust is broken. Some cross themselves, others kiss the bread before eating. These are not acts of show. They are acknowledgements, gratitude, hope, the understanding that tomorrow's bowl is never promised. And so, when evening comes, and the castle quiets once more, the fire is stoked again. The pot is scraped clean, washed, and filled anew with water and grain. Bread is baked for the next day. Ale barrels are checked and marked, and the scent of sustenance once again seeps into the cracks of the stone. The servants gather again in corners. They eat in silence or in murmured conversation. They eat quickly, sometimes with one eye on the corridor, in case they are called again. The food is hot. The bread is rough. The ale is lukewarm, but it is enough for now. And when their bellies are warm, their muscles tired, and their day finally draws to a close, they give a final thought to what they will eat tomorrow. Because in this world, food is never far from the mind. It is a thread running through every task, every exchange, every breath. Let that thread now gently guide us toward the structure that oversees it all, the hierarchy that dictates who receives what, when, and how much. A system of power drawn, not only on paper, but in practice, in protocol, in pasture. By now, you have walked the uneven floors of the servants' quarters. You've breathed in the early morning smoke from the lower kitchens, and watched the flicker of candlelight stretch long across stone walls. You've heard the quiet rustle of garments in passageways, the muted clatter of bowls, and the soft sighs of those ending another day before the next one begins. Beneath all of this, the food, the rhythm, the repetition, there exists an invisible architecture. One not made of timber or limestone, but of rank, control, and order. This is the hand that governs. Social hierarchy in the medieval castle was not a distant structure, not an abstract chart. It was immediate, constant, tangible. It shaped where you walked, when you ate, what you touched, how you were addressed, and whether you could lift your eyes when spoken to. Let us begin at the bottom, not because it is lesser, but because it is the foundation. The castle's labourers were often hired from outside. Stonemasons, carpenters, ditch diggers, roof thatchers, these were men and women whose hands were worn into the shape of tools. They lived near the castle, sometimes in temporary huts, sometimes in cottages granted by the estate. They were not permanent fixtures of the castle interior, but their work was always required. Roads needed mending, gutters clearing, fires rekindling. Their role was crucial, and yet their voice rarely reached beyond the courtyard. Above them were the unskilled indoor servants, the youngest boys and girls who carried water, cleaned rushes from the floor, collected chamber pots, or ran errands from hall to hall. These were the ones who scurried quickly and learned early when to speak and when to remain invisible. They were addressed not by name, but by task. You, with the jug, or boy, hurry. With time, a servant might rise to a more defined role: kitchen assistant, laundress, seamstress, boot polisher, scullery maid. These were not lofty positions, but they came with routine, predictability, perhaps even a cot to sleep on alone. In this small world, Such things mattered greatly. Then came the tradespeople, the bakers, blacksmiths, brewers, and millers. They often worked near, but not within the castle walls. Their craft was respected, their knowledge specialized, and while they were not nobles, they held a curious place between dependence and autonomy. A poor baker might be replaced, a skilled one became essential. Within the castle proper, a servant's role and rank were determined not by ambition, but by access. Proximity to the noble family meant prestige, risk, and responsibility. The chambermaid who dressed the lady of the house was of higher rank than the woman who washed her linens. The squire who held the lord's sword stood above the boy who mucked out the stables. And the steward was often the most powerful servant of all. He was the voice of the Lord when the Lord was away, managing accounts, overseeing inventories, and administering discipline with the quiet authority of someone who never needed to raise his voice. And then, above them all, stood the noble family. Their lives unfolded in different corridors, different rooms, with different rules. They bathed more often, ate more richly, slept more softly. Their clothing was made of finer thread. Their language was layered with formality. But most importantly, their decisions shaped everything below. A noble might decide to entertain guests and a dozen extra loaves must be baked, linens boiled, fires lit, chambers swept. A noble might ride out for a hunt and the stable hands must prepare the horses. The cooks must pack the travel fare. The messengers must deliver advance notice to surrounding villages. And a noble might marry, travel, fall ill, or die, and the ripple of consequence would reach every rung of the household ladder. This layered world was enforced not only through duties, but through unspoken rules. A servant did not sit in the presence of their master unless commanded. A servant did not initiate speech unless asked. A servant did not enter certain rooms, touch certain objects, or wear certain fabrics. Even colors could mark one's station. Bright dyes, deep blues, rich reds, golden yellows were the privilege of those who could afford them. Most servants wore browns, greys, or faded greens, not only because they were practical, but because they were expected. Disobedience could mean punishment, a missed task, a broken item, an ill-timed word. These could result in reduced rations, loss of privileges, or reassignment to more grueling labor. But obedience, too, was its own quiet reward, continued survival, the chance to stay, the possibility, however slight, of advancement. And yet, within this rigid structure, there were delicate balances. The lord might rely entirely on his steward to manage affairs. The lady of the house might confide in her handmaid more than in her own sisters. Trust formed slowly, often across years. A single misstep could shatter it, but careful service could build something resembling respect, though never quite equality. Now, imagine a hallway where two servants pass each other a laundress and a page. Both glance down, but one dips slightly in deference. Why? Not because the page is older, or stronger, or kinder, but because his duties place him closer to nobility, because he may carry a message to the Lord's chamber, while she only carries cloth to the river. Such subtle signs of rank appear constantly: who walks where, who eats when, who sleeps near the fire. But not all rules were enforced from above. The servants had their own inner hierarchies. An older cook might command respect across ranks. A nursemaid with decades of experience might be quietly deferred to even by the steward. Experience mattered, memory mattered. The castle, after all, remembered those who served it well. There were unspoken networks, too, favors traded in hushed tones, one servant covering another's duty, a message passed discreetly, a slice of bread saved. These acts never officially noted wove a fabric of mutual survival. It is important to understand that these structures were not designed for fairness. They were designed for order, for function. And those within them, especially the lower ranks, knew this deeply, but still, there was room for dignity, in posture, in quiet excellence, in the pride of a floor swept perfectly, in the craftsmanship of a well-mended tunic. in the knowledge that even the noble's chamber cannot function without the humble precision of those beneath it. And so, each day, the castle breathed through this living network of roles and responsibilities. The hand that governed did not always wear a crown. Sometimes it carried a broom, sometimes a ledger, sometimes a tray. As the sun arcs through the narrow windows of the high hall, casting long shadows across tapestries and flagstones, every member of the household knows exactly where they stand. Every footstep has its place, every voice its time. Let us hold that image in your mind, now not of oppression, but of complexity, not of cruelty, but of a living system, not a perfect one, not a fair one, but one that, for better or worse, held the world together. And now, having walked through these invisible walls of power, let us turn our attention towards something even more hidden, more intimate, the frailty of the body and the quiet spectre that loomed in every corridor. Within the thick stone walls of the castle, where life moved in a quiet pattern of duty and repetition, there was one presence that never knocked, never bowed, never sought permission, and yet it entered all the same. It was illness. It came quietly, like the chill in early morning air. It whispered through the damp corridors, settled in the cold corners, and lingered in the folds of woolen blankets still damp from the river wash. In a world built upon labor, where the body was the servant's only true possession, health was not merely a blessing. It was a necessity, yet so often it could not be maintained. To understand the daily health of servants and laborers in a medieval castle, one must first understand the world they moved through. Cold, hard surfaces, limited bathing, shared bedding, repetitive motion, damp clothing, uneven meals, long hours, little rest. The body was pushed, pulled, strained, and exposed. Imagine the hands of a laundress constantly submerged in icy water, rubbed raw by soap made from ash and animal fat. Her nails darkened, her joints swollen, her fingers cracked in winter. Or consider the stable hand, breathing in the thick dust of haylofts, his lungs heavy with cough each morning, yet expected to lift, haul, and shovel before the sky had turned blue. Even the air in the castle was not pure. Fires burned day and night, filling rooms with smoke that never quite cleared. Candles of tallow gave off a greasy scent. Lice and fleas were constant companions. Rats slipped under doors. Flies buzzed around kitchens in summer. Disease did not have to be dramatic to be present. Often, it was slow, mundane, persistent. The most common ailments were as ordinary as they were unavoidable. Toothaches that grew into infections, joints that ached from years of kneeling, abscesses, boils, fevers of unknown origin, colds that never truly left, rashes from constant dampness. It was not uncommon for a servant to limp from an old injury, to cough every morning, or to lose teeth in their 20s, and yet they carried on. There were healers, of course, in some castles a resident herbalist, in others a visiting wise woman, midwife, or barber surgeon. The remedies they brought were drawn from the land, from memory, from manuscripts copied by candlelight. 4 coughs, honey and thyme. 4 wounds, comfrey and wine. 4 fever, willow bark, cool cloths, and whispered prayers. The castle's herb garden was more than a garnish patch. It was a living pharmacy. Calendula for skin, lavender for rest, garlic for infection, yarrow to stop bleeding. These remedies were passed down from servant to servant, generation to generation, trusted not because they always worked, but because they were all that could be offered. Serious illness, though, was a different matter. If a servant fell to the floor with fever or chills, if their eyes yellowed or limbs trembled, they were moved if space allowed to a corner chamber, sometimes referred to as the infirmary, though it may have been nothing more than a spare room with a straw bed. They were given broth, water, and quiet. Those who could be spared might sit beside them. Most could not. There was no guarantee of recovery. If the illness passed, the servant returned perhaps weaker, perhaps slower, but back into the rhythm of life. If it worsened, they faded, slowly, sometimes quietly, sometimes not. Their place was soon filled. The rhythm continued. During outbreaks, plague, dysentery, or flux, the castle changed. Servants disappeared from their duties. Rooms were sealed, the kitchens grew quiet, and the air itself seemed to weigh more heavily. Fear moved like a second shadow. Those who survived rarely spoke of it. It was not that they lacked emotion. It was simply too large to carry. For women, health was marked by more than illness. It was marked by blood, by labor, by childbirth. Servant girls might find themselves pregnant, not always by choice, not always with support. A child born in the lower halls was both miracle and burden. Some were raised in secret, others given away, others lost to the cold realities of early life. Midwives served quietly, often with knowledge that both comforted and condemned them in equal measure. Hygiene was rudimentary. Bathing was rare, not for a lack of desire, but because warm water was precious. When possible, a servant might wash in a wooden tub shared among many, the water slowly growing murkier with each turn. Soap was harsh, lye-based, it stung open skin. Yet the feeling of being clean, even briefly, was a kind of healing. Clothing was washed, but not often. The effort required was enormous. So garments were beaten at the river, hung to dry in the wind, repaired again and again. Beds were rarely changed. Fleas were picked from seams. Lice combs were passed between girls in quiet solidarity. To stay healthy was not just luck, it was community. It was the older cook who shared a sprig of rosemary to hang by the bed, the steward who let a sick boy sleep longer, the herbalist who taught a kitchen maid how to mix honey and vinegar for a sore throat. It was not grand gestures. It was the accumulation of care, hidden in tasks. Death was familiar. It came not as drama, but as return. The castle absorbed it. The bell might toll. The pallet might be cleared. A new hand would lift the bucket, sweep the steps, clean the bowl. Life bent, but did not break. And yet, in all this fragility, the human spirit persisted. Servants laughed, danced, sometimes hummed old songs while peeling turnips, whispered stories as they rubbed salves into bruised limbs. They knew what it meant to hurt, to wait, to heal. And somehow, they rose each day and lived again. You may find, as you lie quietly now, that this slow pulse of resilience brings a sort of comfort. That those who lived in cold rooms, with aching backs and heavy breath, left behind something quiet but powerful, the will to carry on. Let this calm understanding settle over you now, like a warm cloth against a fevered brow. And with that, we move from the ailments of the body to the order of its time. The turning of day and night, the structure of hours, the rhythm of movement, rest, and return. Let us settle in, deeper, into the hidden corners of the medieval castle. Imagine that you are neither guest nor lord, but simply one of the many souls whose existence is woven into the endless tapestry of daily labor. Time, for you, is not a number on a clock, but a sensation, a gentle, persistent tide that carries you from darkness into light, and back again. There are no alarms, no digital beeps, no scheduled notifications in this world. Instead, your rhythm is set by things older and more reliable, the chill before dawn, the gradual warming of stone beneath the sun, the faraway call of a rooster in the courtyard, or the first, faint glow through the castle's arrow-slit windows. As night begins to slip away, the castle is at its most peaceful. You might hear the low coo of a pigeon, nesting high above in the eaves. You might sense the air shifting, the cool dampness that collects in the lower passages, and the gentle shuffle of feet against straw. The servants and labourers awake in stages, each person's body so attuned to routine that they rarely need waking by another. Some sleep lightly, always half listening for the signals that their duties are about to begin. A young boy, perhaps the one who tends the kitchen fires, is often the first to rise. He sits up on his straw pallet, pulls his thin blanket closer against the chill, and blinks away the last shadows of sleep. Around him, others begin to stir. A gentle cough from an older woman, the muffled creak of a boot being laced, a whispered prayer, or an old song hummed under the breath. Their movements are soft, as if not to disturb the stone itself. The first task is always fire. Without fire, nothing else can begin. The embers in the kitchen hearth have been banked overnight beneath a blanket of ash, carefully protected by the last person on duty before sleep. Now, the boy gently stirs the ash away, blows on the coals, and coaxes the first orange sparks of the new day. Soon, a small flame flickers, and the air fills with the quiet crackle of renewal. Elsewhere, life stirs. The dairymaids move out to the chilly stalls, wrapping their shawls tightly, their breath misting in the faint light. They murmur softly to the cows, whose patient eyes reflect the newness of morning. The animals, too, know the rhythm. They stand and shift their weight, already expecting the hands that will milk them, the rough brush of straw, the cool press of the pail. For the castle's stable hands, the day starts even earlier in winter. The horses must be fed and groomed before frost settles. The doors to the stable creak open and close, and the steady, comforting sounds of feeding, brushing, and cleaning mingle with the faint scent of hay and leather. Laundry workers rise soon after. Their tasks are dictated by daylight and weather. On bright days, they will hurry to the riverside, bundles balanced on their backs, beating cloth against smooth stones, their hands quickly turning red with cold. On days of rain or snow, they work inside, hanging linens near the heat of the kitchen, or folding what they washed the day before. There is no rush, only routine. Each task is performed with practiced movements, often repeated hundreds, even thousands of times in a lifetime. The sweep of a broom, the lifting of a pot, the wringing of a rag, these are not simply chores, but the gentle, grounding gestures of existence. And so the castle comes alive, layer by layer, long before its noble inhabitants stir. Meals are both the break and the marker of time. The morning meal, never elaborate, is a moment to pause, to wrap tired hands around a bowl of hot pottage, or to chew a hunk of bread made from yesterday's flour. Servants eat quickly, in shifts, never far from their next duty. Sometimes, food is shared in companionable silence. At other times, a joke or a whispered story passes from one to another, a reminder that even in labor, there is humanity. With the rising sun, the pace quickens. The steward begins his rounds, checking that everything is in place. Beds made, corridors swept, water carried, fires stoked. He may nod quietly at a well-done task, or speak softly if something is missed. His presence is both assurance and quiet authority, the keeper of the castle's invisible schedule. Each person knows their role, their time, their place. The laundress does not leave her linens to help in the kitchen unless asked. The kitchen boy does not feed the animals unless someone is ill. There is comfort in this predictability, a sense that, in a world full of uncertainties, the next hour can at least be counted on. The day unfolds as a series of gentle waves: work, brief rest, work again. Midday brings another meal, sometimes a little more generous if the kitchens have extra or the nobles are celebrating. For the most part, though, it is more of the same simple pottage, rough bread, weak ale. Hunger is not absent, but it is quieted, at least for a while. Afternoon means more chores: sewing, repairing, scrubbing, carrying. Messages are delivered, boots are polished, tapestries dusted, floors swept and reswept as people and animals pass by. If the weather allows, servants might step into the sun for a moment, warming their faces, stretching their backs, exchanging a few words with someone they trust. These small respites, brief as they are treasured. Sometimes, a feast day or market day interrupts the pattern. The castle might buzz with excitement a guest arrives, or a festival is held. The rhythm accelerates, work multiplies, but even then, the underlying structure remains. The chores are doubled, but their order is never truly disturbed. With evening comes the softening of pace. Chores are finished as best they can be, supplies are counted and put away, and the fires are banked for the night. The castle gradually quiets. Servants gather in their quarters, or by the kitchen fire, sharing what is left of the day's bread, talking in low voices, mending socks or patching sleeves by candlelight. Someone might sing, or recall an old tale, or simply listen to the wind against the stone. Then, at last, the body is allowed to rest. People stretch out on pallets, using rolled-up cloaks or sacks of straw for pillows. There are no sheets, no private rooms, only the comfort of being together, of sharing warmth and stories and silence. Sometimes there is a little laughter, sometimes a sigh, and then, gradually, sleep seeps in. But even rest is not entirely free. The castle never fully sleeps. There are night watchers, guards at the gates, a servant who tends the embers, so that the fire will be alive for the dawn. Sometimes a child wakes crying. Sometimes an old woman sits up, troubled by aches that never leave her bones. But mostly there is peace. The seasons shape every aspect of this rhythm. In winter, the dark stretches long, and servants spend more hours near the fire. Work continues, but quietly. In summer, the days extend, and so does the labor. There are gardens to tend, walls to repair, animals to care for long after sunset. Spring brings mud, planting, hope. Autumn brings harvest, storing, preparation for the cold to come. Each year is a wheel, turning in gentle, predictable arcs. Each day is a song, its notes familiar, its refrain comforting. There is a beauty in this regularity. It offers not only survival, but a subtle sense of belonging, a shared existence, where everyone has a role to play, a step to take, a rhythm to keep. Even the smallest act of floor swept, a pot scrubbed becomes part of something larger and enduring. Let yourself imagine, now, the quiet castle at midnight. The last embers glow. The moon sends its pale light through narrow windows, falling across the stone floor, touching a sleeping face here, a cold body there. All is still, except for the slow, steady breath of those at rest. This is not a grand or dramatic life, but it is one that persists, quietly, day after day, season after season, a rhythm that is comforting, even hypnotic. And as you settle into this slow, repetitive flow, allow yourself to drift with it. Let the sound of distant footsteps, the hush of breath, the soft rustle of straw lull you further toward sleep. We have traced the movement of their days and the softness of their nights. Now, let us turn, gently, toward the world that lived inside them, their beliefs, their fears, their hopes, and their quiet prayers. Now, let us move inward beyond the stone and straw, beyond daily chores and the steady rhythms of labor. Quiet your thoughts and drift into the quieter, invisible corners of a servant's mind, where the soft murmurs of hope, belief, and spirituality resided. For the medieval servant, the unseen was as real, if not more real, than the stone beneath their feet. Belief was not an abstract thought, it was woven into their days, whispered into their tasks, carried softly through their dreams. Imagine yourself in the gentle darkness before dawn, when the first tasks begin. Before your feet touch the cold stone floor, your lips move softly, forming a prayer short, memorized, repeated daily. You whisper it like a mantra, an invocation to saints, angels, or simply a plea for strength, health, and protection. In this world, faith was neither distant nor formal. It was intimate, immediate, and deeply personal. Saints were not abstract figures in frescoes. They were companions, protectors, and friends. Santa might watch over a mother expecting her first child. St. Christopher guarded travelers and messengers, while St. Catherine stood quietly beside the young girl, carrying buckets of water, guiding her through fatigue. Church bells rang throughout the day, marking not just the hours, but the invisible rhythms of prayer. Servants paused briefly, subtly to cross themselves or whisper quick supplications. No grand ceremony, no elaborate rituals, just small moments of acknowledgement woven seamlessly into their daily tasks. At the heart of every medieval castle lay a chapel, perhaps modest, perhaps grand, but always present. It was here, in the flickering candlelight, that servants gathered quietly in stolen moments. They knelt on cold stones, worn smooth by generations of supplicants, eyes fixed on a simple wooden cross or statue draped in faded linen. This chapel was their refuge not from work, but from uncertainty. Here, in the gentle hush, worries could be shared without words. A prayer for an ill friend, a plea for rain, gratitude for bread, protection against illness, each request offered silently, trustingly, into the vast quiet of faith. Pilgrimages were rare for servants. Their journeys of faith happened within the walls or nearby shrines. Some servants carried small tokens, wooden crosses worn smooth by fingers, tiny medals pressed into palms during difficult moments, or herbs blessed on feast days, tied into bundles and tucked beneath pillows or into pockets. Belief extended beyond the formal structure of the church. Folk traditions, whispers of old practices, and half-forgotten rituals blended effortlessly into daily spiritual life. Herbs were hung in doorways to ward off harm. Salt was sprinkled across thresholds to protect against misfortune. The waxing and waning moon guided planting, mending, healing, and prayers alike. The boundary between faith and superstition was fluid. Magic was not entirely separate from religion, nor entirely embraced. It lived quietly at the edges, in small gestures, knots tied into aprons for luck, coins hidden under hearthstones to bless a home, whispered chants said softly over sick children. Festivals, too, brought spirituality vividly to life. On feast days, routine softened, replaced briefly by celebration and ritual. Servants joined in processions, carrying candles, banners, and small gifts 2 cents. On such days, there was music, not grand orchestras, but simple songs sung with voices worn by daily work. Even the weary stable hand joined in quietly, his voice rough but earnest. Yet spirituality was not always gentle, it also held fear. Hell was as vividly imagined as heaven. Paintings in the chapel or images recounted by traveling priests showed souls in torment, a constant reminder of consequence. Servants carried this awareness carefully, guiding their choices, shaping their honesty, and nudging their charity. The afterlife was ever present, not as a distant idea, but as part of everyday reality. Servants believed deeply in the presence of spirits. Ghosts might linger, restless or protective. A mother might sense her child lost too soon, or an old servant might feel the comforting presence of a friend who had passed. Stories passed in whispers late at night, shared in corners by candlelight. These tales did not frighten as much as they reassured, a quiet proof that death was not the end, but merely another stage in the same eternal rhythm. Even death itself was ritualized with tenderness. When someone passed away, the servants quietly gathered around the body, washing it gently, clothing it carefully, murmuring prayers and farewells. Small coins were placed over the eyes to close them, herbs scattered gently to sweeten the journey beyond. Grief was familiar, but it was softened by belief. Every loss came with the understanding of reunion, the hope of peace, the reassurance of rest. In faith, death was not emptiness, it was the gentle release from earthly labor. Each servant carried within them a personal cathedral, a quiet place of reflection and devotion. It might be no larger than the space between their fingertips, no grander than a whispered prayer before sleep. Yet, it was profound. They spoke to saints as one speaks to family. They listened to hymns as one listens to lullabies. Their spirituality was not distant theology, it was comfort, courage, and continuity. Spiritual practices and beliefs also strengthened the bonds within the servant community. They cared for one another, guided by faith and tradition. An older servant would teach younger ones not only how to mend clothes or bake bread, but also how to say a particular prayer, how to recognize signs in dreams, or how to plant herbs blessed on a holy day. Belief was practical as well as spiritual. It guided their hands, their hearts, their daily interactions. Faith taught compassion, patience, forgiveness, qualities vital to surviving the close quarters and hard tasks of daily life. For servants, belief was not a choice, it was a quiet necessity. They navigated uncertainty through prayers, calmed fears through rituals, and softened pain through hope. Each day was shaped subtly by this quiet, profound spirituality, sometimes unspoken, but always present. As night falls once more over the castle, and shadows stretch gently across corridors, let us imagine the servants settling into their pallets, whispering prayers into the darkness. Perhaps they see saints smiling softly, or angels gently keeping watch. Perhaps they hear old hymns softly echoed in dreams, or feel the reassuring weight of tokens beneath their pillows. As you drift further towards sleep, let their quiet faith carry you gently, softly, and reassuringly into rest. Now, as we gently close this chapter, our journey moves outward once again, this time into the subtle, often unspoken interactions between communities. Relationships built on trade, necessity, friendship, and conflict that reached beyond castle walls. Beyond the comforting stone walls and the familiar warmth of the castle's hearth, there existed a quiet, invisible network, a gentle web connecting villages, hamlets, farms, and forests. To understand the world of medieval servants fully, we must now turn our gaze outward, beyond their daily chores, into the subtle threads that bound castle and community together. For the medieval servant, life did not stop at the castle gates. It flowed outward, following roads and pathways worn smooth by generations of feet. Imagine yourself stepping gently out through a small side gate, early in the morning. The air carries the cool scent of dew on grass, and the gentle murmur of waking birdsong fills your ears. Villages lay scattered across the landscape, like gentle clusters of stone and thatch. These villages were neither distant nor foreign, they were lifelines. From here came grain for bread, milk for cheese, vegetables for the cook's pot. Every cabbage, carrot, and onion that filled the castle pantry began its journey here, lovingly tended by hands that rose and rested in rhythm with the seasons. Trade was quiet, but essential. Farmers carried produce in wooden carts along muddy roads, their sturdy boots sinking softly into damp earth. They bartered with castle servants at the outer gate, exchanging baskets of fresh eggs, wheels of cheese wrapped in linen, bundles of herbs, and jars of honey. Payment was not always in coins often. It was made in salt, cloth, firewood, or small favors exchanged without a word. Relationships grew slowly and carefully. The baker knew which miller provided the finest flour. The cook trusted certain gardeners for their gentle care of herbs. A stable hand relied on local farriers, skilled in shaping iron shoes. These bonds, though practical, were softened by familiarity and trust, yet community was not without friction. Disputes were common, though rarely dramatic. A village might resent higher taxes or fees imposed by the castle's lord. Sometimes, arguments arose over grazing rights, the use of wells, or boundaries of land. These conflicts were handled quietly, through negotiation and subtle exchanges rather than violence. Servants were often the quiet mediators, carrying messages back and forth, whispering advice, or simply listening to grievances. They understood both worlds intimately, village and castle, making them natural bridges in resolving disputes. Festivals offered relief from daily tensions. On these special days, villagers and servants mingled freely, their usual roles softened. A stable boy might share a dance with a village girl, spinning gently beneath bright ribbons tied to maypoles. Servants laughed and chatted openly, trading stories and small gifts. For a brief moment, all shared a common humanity, united by laughter, music, and tradition. But communities could be isolated too. Each village maintained its distinct identity, traditions, and sometimes dialects, which could lead to gentle suspicion or misunderstandings. Differences in speech, dress, or custom were noted quietly. Gossip might circulate softly, whispered gently by women washing clothes or men tending livestock. These subtle tensions rarely escalated into conflict, but they colored interactions with caution. Still, cooperation was necessary. When harvest came, everyone, villagers and castle servants alike, joined hands in mutual labor. Men, women, and children moved gently through fields, gathering wheat, barley, and rye. Voices mingled in songs passed down through generations, rhythmic tunes making work lighter. This shared toil strengthened bonds and created mutual respect, reminding everyone that survival depended upon cooperation rather than division. Sometimes, visitors from further away passed through. Traveling merchants, pilgrims bound for distant shrines, or wandering minstrels arrived with news and stories from lands beyond. Servants gathered eagerly, listening to tales of far-off cities, strange customs, and wonders never imagined. These visitors brought more than goods, they carried dreams and curiosity, opening windows to the wider world beyond familiar hills. Yet outsiders were met with caution too. Fear of illness or conflict from neighboring lands could lead to gentle suspicion. Guards watched carefully from the castle walls, quietly assessing intentions. If trouble arose, communities drew together, not in panic, but in quiet solidarity. The castle became a refuge, its walls protecting villagers until threats passed softly away. Nature itself shaped interactions. A harsh winter could bind villages and castle servants together in shared hardship. Heavy snow blocked roads, limiting supplies and isolating communities. In these moments, generosity blossomed quietly. Neighbors shared firewood, food, and warmth. Small acts of kindness became essential, creating bonds that lasted far beyond the thaw. The forest, too, influenced relations. Servants and villagers relied on its bounty for berries, mushrooms, wood, and game. Yet the forest was also mysterious, sometimes dangerous. Legends whispered softly around hearths spoke of spirits and creatures that guarded the trees. Communities approached cautiously, showing quiet respect through small rituals, sprinkling salt, whispering prayers, or leaving tiny offerings at the forest's edge. Local churches connected communities spiritually. Priests traveled gently between villages, offering blessings, advice, and comfort. Servants from the castle attended village churches, kneeling side by side with farmers and weavers, united in quiet devotion. Religion was a gentle, powerful thread binding people together, easing tensions and offering hope. But illness could strain these bonds. Outbreaks of disease, plague, or fever brought quiet fear. Villages might close themselves off, wary of travelers, yet even then, kindness persisted softly. Herbs and food might be left discreetly at village gates. Prayers whispered gently for recovery. Compassion and quiet courage defined relationships, even in the hardest times. Justice was another gentle thread. Local disputes were resolved by village elders, quietly respected by castle authorities. Serious conflicts might be brought before the castle lord, whose judgment was softened by advice from trusted servants familiar with local customs. Justice was rarely harsh, more often it was practical, aimed at gentle reconciliation rather than punishment. Even trade had its quiet rituals. Market days brought communities together gently. Villagers arranged stalls in soft morning light, displaying goods proudly, yet humbly woven cloth, carved spoons, fragrant herbs, fresh vegetables. Castle servants moved carefully among stalls, exchanging news, laughter, and goods. These exchanges strengthened bonds, reinforcing quiet interdependence. When conflicts arose, perhaps over unfair pricing or stolen livestock, they were handled softly, through conversation rather than violence. Community elders mediated disputes gently, ensuring peace remained steady and quiet. Thus, the relationship between castle and village, servant and farmer, lord and commoner, was complex yet harmonious. Interactions were marked by mutual dependence, quiet tension, and gentle resolution. Each relied upon the other, creating a delicate balance that sustained them all. As evening settles once more over these quiet villages and castle towers, picture the pathways gently fading into darkness, fires glowing softly behind shuttered windows. Imagine whispers of good night carried gently on evening breezes, prayers murmured quietly beneath starry skies. Allow yourself to feel part of this gentle, interconnected web, a quiet reminder of how community, in all its complexity, sustained life softly, persistently, and beautifully. Now, as your thoughts drift gently into rest, let us turn to stories of quiet resilience, the subtle, enduring strength with which servants adapted, resisted, and quietly shaped their world. In the quiet corners of medieval life, within shadows cast by towering castle walls, beneath low ceilings of thatched cottages, and along the well-trodden paths connecting village and manor, there lived a gentle, persistent strength. It was not loud or violent, not bold or dramatic. Instead, it was the soft hum of resilience, a quiet determination to adapt, endure, and gently resist the weight of circumstance. Imagine, for a moment, the worn pathways around the castle grounds, small trails shaped by countless footsteps, carved slowly into the earth over many years. These paths were silent testimonies, quietly reminding us of lives spent walking, carrying, fetching, and returning again. Each step was small, seemingly insignificant, yet collectively they formed enduring marks upon the land. For servants and laborers, adaptation was not a choice, it was a gentle necessity. Seasons shifted slowly, crops thrived or failed, and the demands of their masters rose and fell like quiet tides. Servants learned to move with these rhythms, bending softly but never breaking beneath the weight of daily life. Consider the laundress at the riverside. Her hands, calloused from scrubbing, became strong enough to withstand cold waters. She adapted by quietly singing old songs, rhythmically washing linens, turning repetitive labor into a gentle meditation. She did not resist openly, but rather transformed her task into something bearable, even comforting. Or the stable hand, whose days began before dawn, moving silently among horses, caring for animals larger and stronger than himself. He adapted by learning the subtle language of horses' gentle touches, quiet whispers, calm gestures. Over time, he shaped his duties into a quiet companionship, rather than mere obligation, creating dignity within humble tasks. Resistance, too, took quiet forms. Servants rarely rebelled openly, but instead found small, subtle ways to assert themselves. Perhaps a maid lingered slightly longer by a warm fire, pausing gently before returning to cold corridors. Perhaps a kitchen helper quietly pocketed an extra morsel of bread, sharing it secretly with another. Small acts of kindness, generosity, and defiance became gentle rebellions, quiet ways of reclaiming autonomy. Adaptation also meant quiet innovation. Servants and laborers became masters of making much from little. Cloth was patched and mended until it held warmth far beyond its intended lifespan. Pots were repaired carefully, shoes cobbled together lovingly, and leftovers transformed into nourishing soups. Necessity bred quiet creativity, an understated artistry born of need and perseverance. Children learned early how to adapt. They watched quietly, absorbing lessons through gentle observation. They learned how to move softly, speak carefully, and perform tasks with practiced ease. Yet within their silence, children also resisted, gently playing games hidden from adult eyes, sharing secrets in hushed whispers, and finding joy despite hardship. Servants also quietly preserved their cultural traditions, subtly resisting efforts to erase their heritage. They passed stories down softly, generation to generation, around evening hearths or whispered beside sleeping children. Songs were sung in low voices, dances practiced privately. In these quiet ways, they maintained their identities, gently preserving dignity amidst the demands of daily service. Resistance appeared, too, in gentle solidarity. Servants quietly protected one another, covering for a sick friend, sharing food discreetly, or offering comfort during difficult times. This quiet support created bonds stronger than any imposed hierarchy, weaving communities together in gentle defiance of isolation and hardship. Women, in particular, became quiet experts in adaptation. Midwives, herbalists, and healers learned carefully from nature, adapting knowledge to suit immediate needs. They gathered herbs at precise times, blending medicines with quiet reverence. They brought new life into the world gently, protected mothers softly, and cared for the ill patiently, their quiet strength often overlooked but profoundly essential. When illness or hardship struck, communities adapted together. Quietly, they shared resources, cared for the sick, and mourned losses collectively. Rituals evolved gently to accommodate grief. Celebrations adjusted quietly to reflect circumstances. Each moment of sorrow or joy became an opportunity for subtle resilience and adaptation. Even in times of scarcity, quiet ingenuity emerged. When food supplies dwindled, servants experimented gently, creating nourishing broths from bones, stretching grain into hearty porridges, and discovering ways to flavor food with herbs gathered quietly from hedgerows. These adaptations were never grand, but they ensured survival softly, persistently, season after season. Adaptation also shaped their homes. Simple cottages were quietly reinforced with local materials: mud, straw, wood carefully selected to withstand weather. Roofs were gently repaired before storms arrived. Hearthstones cleaned meticulously to ensure warmth. Each careful, quiet act became a testament to their determination to protect and sustain life. Resistance and adaptation also manifested in quiet spiritual practices. Servants prayed gently, privately, maintaining rituals even when discouraged. They whispered blessings over meals, quietly lit candles in hidden corners, and secretly observed old customs alongside new teachings. Their gentle faith offered comfort and quiet strength, nurturing resilience within uncertainty. Even language became a subtle form of resistance. Servants maintained dialects and expressions unique to their communities, quietly preserving identities against external pressures. Stories and proverbs, shared softly in familiar speech, reinforced community bonds and gently asserted cultural independence. Quiet resistance extended to relationships with masters as well. Servants learned carefully which orders to follow closely, which instructions to interpret flexibly, and when to quietly delay or modify tasks. Subtle acts misunderstanding directions slightly, completing tasks slowly yet carefully allowed them gentle autonomy within the confines of their roles. Physical spaces also bore quiet marks of adaptation. Narrow corridors, hidden alcoves, and small storerooms became secret sanctuaries, places servants could rest briefly, whisper private conversations, or exchange gentle gestures of kindness unseen by masters. These quiet spaces provided necessary relief and moments of autonomy within their structured days. Nature itself offered quiet lessons in adaptation. Servants observed seasons closely, adjusting tasks accordingly, planting, harvesting, storing, mending in gentle harmony with natural rhythms. Their lives became softly synchronized with weather, moon cycles, and seasonal shifts, quietly acknowledging nature's quiet power to dictate daily routines. In moments of external conflict, such as invasions or wars, servants adapted quietly by protecting each other, sharing resources discreetly, and sheltering quietly behind castle walls. They endured uncertainty with quiet courage, drawing strength from solidarity and community bonds rather than grand gestures of defiance. Yet the most profound resistance and adaptation lay within their hearts' quiet determination to find meaning and dignity within simple, repetitive tasks. Each servant knew their labor mattered deeply, that their quiet acts sustained lives, maintained communities, and upheld structures far beyond their immediate view. Their footprints, though soft and gentle, left deep impressions upon the earth. Quiet trails, small gestures, whispered prayers, subtle kindnesses, these gentle marks endured, quietly reminding us of human resilience, strength, and dignity in the face of challenge. As you rest now, gently drifting towards sleep, allow yourself to feel connected to this quiet legacy. Let the gentle hum of adaptation and resilience soothe you, reminding you softly of humanity's quiet strength to endure, adapt, and gently resist. And now, as this chapter softly closes, we turn our thoughts toward legacies preserved not in stone or text, but quietly in values, traditions, and wisdom gently passed through generations. In the gentle flow of history, it is often quiet, subtle threads that hold the strongest connections between past and present. Now, as we move softly into the final chapters of our journey, let us pause to reflect upon the intangible treasures quietly carried forward by generations, the humble values and traditions that shaped medieval life, sustained community, and left gentle imprints upon the future. For servants and laborers who lived quietly within the castle walls and surrounding villages, legacies were not inscribed in grand texts or carved upon statues. Instead, their legacies whispered softly through everyday actions, gently passed from parent to child, mentor to apprentice, friend to friend. Imagine yourself now seated near a warm hearth, the quiet crackle of embers filling the gentle silence of evening. An elder servant sits nearby, her face softly illuminated by the firelight. Her hands, aged but strong, skillfully mend a garment, each careful stitch embodying patience and care. As she works, she quietly imparts wisdom to a young girl beside her, lessons not spoken loudly, but shared gently, as valuable as any written teaching. These quiet lessons form the heart of their legacy, values rooted deeply in humility, compassion, resilience, and quiet strength. Humility was perhaps the most essential virtue. It was gently practiced every day, not as subservience, but as the quiet acknowledgement of interdependence. Servants understood deeply that no task was insignificant, each chore quietly supporting the greater community. A cook stirring a humble pot of stew or a stable hand cleaning straw understood that their gentle labors sustained the entire household. Compassion, too, flourished softly within castle walls. Servants cared for one another quietly, recognizing shared vulnerabilities. When a servant fell ill, others quietly stepped in, taking on extra chores without complaint. Small acts of kindness, sharing food, mending clothing, comforting tired children formed the gentle foundation of community life. This quiet compassion ensured collective endurance, gently softening life's daily hardships. Resilience was another quiet legacy passed down through generations. Servants and laborers learned early to accept challenges gracefully, adapting softly rather than resisting stubbornly. They understood quietly that life would offer both hardship and ease, and their gentle strength lay in accepting both equally. This resilience allowed them to face uncertainty calmly, with quiet courage and enduring hope. Wisdom was also gently preserved. Elders quietly taught younger servants the subtle art of observation, instructing them gently to watch, listen, and learn from the world around them. Practical knowledge when to plant, how to mend, which herbs healed was quietly shared, becoming gentle traditions of invaluable worth. This quiet wisdom ensured survival, carefully passed forward with reverence and care. Traditions, too, formed quiet, lasting legacies. Annual rituals gently marked time, connecting generations through shared experiences. Planting rituals in spring, harvest celebrations in autumn, quiet observances during solstices and sunset days, all these gentle traditions reminded servants of their place within the rhythm of nature, quietly affirming their connections to one another and to the land. Meals held quiet traditions of their own. Even humble food became sacred when shared, quietly blessed with whispered prayers. The simple act of breaking bread together, however modest affair, became a gentle affirmation of community. Recipes passed quietly from mother to daughter, cook to apprentice, carried memories, warmth, and quiet continuity. Stories, too, became gentle vessels of tradition. Folktales whispered softly around evening fires carried lessons of bravery, kindness, and humility. Legends of saints gently guided moral values, reminding servants quietly of virtues worth emulating. Personal stories, shared quietly among friends, reinforced bonds and preserved memories, gently connecting past, present, and future. Songs quietly woven through daily chores offered gentle companionship, their melodies softly carried from fields to kitchens, from riversides to firesides. These simple songs became quiet legacies, enduring gently through generations, softly affirming unity and shared purpose. Craftsmanship was another gentle tradition lovingly preserved. Skills such as weaving, sewing, carpentry, and metalwork quietly passed from master to apprentice, their quiet beauty expressed through humble tools and simple materials. These carefully preserved crafts carried gentle pride, quietly affirming the dignity of labor and creativity within humble circumstances. Even spiritual traditions held quiet strength. Servants gently maintained rituals, softly lighting candles, whispering prayers, and observing quiet customs inherited from ancestors. Their faith was quietly resilient, gently providing comfort, courage, and meaning within the quiet rhythms of daily life. Education, too, was quietly valued, though rarely formal. Elders gently taught younger servants letters, numbers, and practical skills. Quiet learning happened informally, around kitchen tables or firesides, quietly affirming the gentle importance of knowledge, however modest its application. Respect for nature was another quiet legacy passed gently through generations. Servants lived softly attuned to seasons, weather, and natural cycles, quietly observing subtle signs: birdsong, plant growth, shifting skies. This gentle reverence for nature quietly guided daily decisions, softly affirming humanity's quiet place within the larger, interconnected world. Relationships between generations were quietly cherished. Elders gently guided younger servants, offering quiet wisdom, encouragement, and care. Younger generations, in turn, quietly respected elders, honoring their experience and gently ensuring their comfort. This quiet intergenerational bond formed a gentle thread of continuity, softly preserving community strength. Even daily tasks carried quiet legacies. Every broomstroke, stitch, and chore became a gentle affirmation of care, pride, and dedication. Quiet dignity infused even humble work, softly reminding servants that their labor mattered deeply, quietly shaping community and sustaining life. Quiet respect was another gentle tradition, preserved carefully through generations. Servants treated one another with quiet courtesy, recognizing shared humanity regardless of status. Simple gestures holding doors, offering thanks, quietly assisting others became gentle affirmations of mutual respect, quietly shaping interactions and relationships. Within these gentle traditions and values lay quiet rebellion against harsher realities. Servants gently asserted humanity, dignity, and worth, quietly resisting pressures to diminish or forget their identities. Quiet legacies softly preserved traditions, values, and identities despite external hardships, gently affirming strength, resilience, and quiet pride. As night settles softly upon the castle, imagine the quiet whispers of these legacies, gently passed through generations. Imagine elders softly instructing children, quiet voices sharing wisdom, gentle hands preserving traditions. Each quiet act formed gentle footprints upon history, softly shaping future generations. Now, as you drift gently towards sleep, feel quietly connected to this soft legacy. Allow these gentle values and traditions to soothe you softly, reminding you quietly of humanity's enduring strength, compassion, resilience, and quiet dignity. As this chapter softly closes, we turn gently toward reflection and closure, softly gathering threads of our journey, offering quiet comfort, and preparing to bid farewell. As we gently approach the conclusion of our journey, let us pause here, softly, in quiet reflection. Throughout this long and gentle exploration, you have walked silently through corridors and gardens, stood quietly beside hearths and rivers, and listened carefully to whispers of daily life from centuries past. In these quiet moments, you have touched upon a world now faded, yet gently resonating still. In medieval castles, beneath their grand towers and solid walls, lay countless quiet stories. Lives lived softly, humbly, persistently, often unnoticed, yet deeply woven into the gentle tapestry of history. Each servant, laborer, or villager whose story we've quietly followed left subtle, enduring footprints, echoes gently carried forward, quietly shaping our present in ways we rarely pause to notice. These echoes are not loud or dramatic, they are subtle threads softly connecting past and present. Consider the quiet dignity of labor, humble tasks repeated with patience, skill, and care. Though centuries pass, this gentle pride endures today in every careful stitch sewn, each meal thoughtfully prepared, each small task completed with quiet respect and attention. Think softly now of the quiet rhythms we've explored, days gently measured by sunlight, seasons quietly guiding tasks, lives carefully attuned to nature's subtle cues. Even today, when life seems hurried and complicated, a gentle yearning for rhythm remains, softly calling us back towards simpler ways of living, quietly reminding us of a quieter harmony once known. Reflect gently upon the quiet strength of community. We've witnessed neighbors softly supporting one another, quiet acts of kindness, compassion shared in subtle ways. These echoes endure quietly, softly encouraging us to find connections in our own communities, to gently extend kindness, quietly nurture friendships, and softly build solidarity. Feel, too, the gentle legacy of resilience, lives quietly facing uncertainty with calm acceptance, adapting softly to challenges without bitterness or despair. This quiet strength resonates today, gently reminding us to meet difficulties calmly, with gentle courage, quiet flexibility, and persistent hope. Even spiritual legacies softly endure, faith gently expressed through humble prayers, quiet rituals, gentle respect for life's mysteries. Today, these quiet practices continue softly, in moments of reflection, gratitude whispered gently, quiet contemplation shared softly among friends and family. Consider also the quiet lessons of stewardship, careful tending of resources, gentle respect for nature, subtle awareness of our interconnectedness. This gentle legacy softly guides us today, quietly urging us toward careful, mindful living, softly reminding us to preserve and protect our shared world. Most importantly, think gently of the quiet legacies of humanity. We've explored humility softly expressed through modesty, compassion quietly shared, quiet dignity preserved in simple acts of service. These subtle echoes remind us quietly of what matters most: kindness, patience, gentleness, quiet perseverance in the face of challenges. Each servant, each humble laborer, whose quiet life we've gently explored, left behind not monuments or texts, but gentle echoes quietly preserved in values, traditions, memories, and quiet lessons softly carried forward by generations. Now, as our journey gently concludes, let us imagine softly that the castle we've walked through remains standing quietly, its stones worn smooth by centuries of gentle use. Picture sunlight softly filtering through ancient windows, gently illuminating rooms once filled with quiet life. Imagine quiet footsteps still softly echoing along corridors, whispered voices gently carried by gentle breezes. Though silent now, these echoes remain quietly present, soft reminders of countless lives quietly lived, of simple, profound moments gently shared, of quiet joys, quiet sorrows, quiet hopes that softly sustain generations. Let these gentle echoes soothe you now, softly guiding your thoughts toward restful sleep. Allow yourself to feel quietly connected, part of this gentle human story, softly comforted by reminders of our shared humanity, quiet strength, and enduring resilience. As you drift quietly into rest, carry gently within you these subtle legacies. Allow quiet dignity, gentle compassion, persistent hope, and quiet community to softly comfort you, quietly guiding your dreams toward peacefulness. And remember, this quiet story, how it truly ends, it continues softly within each of us, gently shaping our lives, quietly connecting past, present, and future. Let us rest now, gently, knowing quietly that the echoes we've explored will softly remain, gently whispering reminders of lives quietly lived, softly sustaining us always. Rest gently, sleep quietly, and dream softly. Good night.